Redditors who worked in retail, what are your you can't make this up stories? Story 1. Target, we have a code yellow for missing kids. Whole team drops what they're doing and we all help. Usually child is found within minutes. One case on a slow night, the missing boy, 10, could not be found. Parent is frantic and getting more frantic. Would he have gone to the car on his own, I offer? Which got me screamed at about he would never, and he's been kidnapped and I'm not taking things seriously. He had gone out to the car on his own. Story 2, Best Buy. Lady comes in with a 10% off coupon and asks me how much it'll get her off on an $80 antenna. I explain $8, to which she is surprised and angrily picks the $50 one. While ringing her up, she asks why the antenna is $45, and when I explain how 10% off works again, she replies, I thought you said $8. Story 3. Worked customer service at well-known superstore. A few times I had moments of just complete brain shutting down shock at some of the people tried to pull. The most memorable was coming back from break. I'd go through all the clothing areas to avoid customers. I went around a corner and bumped into a lady in the shoe aisle with an armful of boxes. I helped her pick up the boxes she dropped and went back to the service counter. About 3 minutes later, that same woman walked up, put the boxes on the counter, and said she'd like to return them. I kind of stopped and stared at her. I told her I just saw her bring them directly from the floor over to here. She repeated she wanted to return them. I didn't get paid enough to argue, so I keyed in the code for a manager, made the return for her, like $200 on a gift card, and off she went. The manager in loss prevention got her before she made it out the door. Another time, 2 guys came in to pick up a MoneyGram. He showed a Cali license, so I asked what he was doing all the way in Iowa. He told me he was on the run from the law. I just laughed and dismissed it as a joke. 20 minutes later, a guy in a Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts cuts to the front of the line, puts a badge down, and tells me he's a U.S. Marshal. I told him I thought the guy was joking about being on the run, and the marshal says, he actually told you that? Anyways, they pulled me to go speak with the store manager so he can let her know they will be arresting the guy as soon as he leaves the store. I ask if I can watch, and the marshal says, sure, why not? And the store manager tells me to get my ass back to work. LOL, didn't get to see it go down. Story 4. Was working retail at a Sam Goody's record store many years ago and training a young girl at the cash register. She was very quiet and shy. It was her first job ever and she was very, very nervous. An older gentleman came up to the counter with a cassette tape that he was very excited about. Apparently, he had been looking for it for quite some time and had finally found it at our store. In his excitement as he spoke, his dentures popped out of his mouth, bounced across the counter, and hit this young trainee right in the waist. She let out a screech, threw her hands in the air, and jumped backwards about 5 feet. The old gentleman yelled, "All of it!" Reached across the counter, grabbed his dentures, and popped them right back in. The whole event took about 3 seconds. It was hilarious. But this young girl was just shaking like a leaf and in disbelief of what had just happened to her. It was hilarious. Story 5. My first job other than babysitting or casual household labor as a teenager was at an antique store. Mostly I just came in after school to dust and vacuum, help with heavy lifting, etc. But if the owner had an errand, I was fully in charge. It was quite a nice job. One afternoon, a lady came in to shop. She brought her notebook and borrowed my measuring tape when she found a dining room table that suited her style. I would like to order this table, but 4 inches longer. Ma'am, we aren't sourcing our European antiques from a workshop, you know? I can refer you to someone who could build a reasonable facsimile to your specifications, but there's literally no way for me to order what you want. An absolute fit was thrown. Apparently, she called my boss the next day. Boss suffered no fools, didn't need money, and only opened the shop because her husband retired and boss didn't want to stay home with him all day. I don't know exactly what was said on the call, but I got a $20 slipped into my hand, the way grandmothers do it, when I got to work that afternoon. Baby, you earned this for putting up with that old bitch. And $20 was real money circa 1985. Story 6. 2 ladies were doing a bold shoplifting spree. City police were at every store exit, waiting for them to leave the premises. Store security was tracking them through the store. We were told to leave them totally alone if they came into our area. Sure enough, here they came into my area. One woman was pushing a stroller with a little boy in it, approximately 2 years old. The other one was pushing of those old-fashioned baby carriages, like from the 1920s, with a blanket thrown over it. I heard later that someone had asked her about her baby, and she said it had breathing problems and needed privacy, thus the blanket over the entire carriage. They shopped all 3 floors of our store, filling up the carriage, any room in the stroller, and filling girdles under their clothes, getting physically larger the more time they spent in the store. They finally attempted to return to their car with $5,000 plus worth of merchandise and were stopped by police. Rumor has it they even had 16 pairs of earrings stuffed into their underpants. The baby that has breathing problems was revealed to be a plastic baby doll. Story 7. I once accidentally locked a pregnant woman in the store to take my break. I was working the store in the mall alone and we had just had a rush. Everyone cleared out. I locked the gate to take my dinner break. When I came back 15 minutes later, a security guard was trying to figure out how to get her out. Apparently, she was in the fitting rooms, and I didn't realize it. She was so mad naturally, and let me know she was going to complain to corporate. I called my manager after she left to own up to my mistake before she heard from the customer. Later, the customer called me after she calmed down and let me know she wasn't going to tell on me and asked me to be more careful next time. The manager let me go the next day due to my own admission. Story 8. Not me, but a story for my sister who's not on Reddit. She worked at a craft store for her first job out of high school. One day, they had a bird in their store. No one could catch it. It would always fly away and perch on a high place in the store out of reach. It was in there for a couple days when it finally got too weak to fly very high anymore. My sister finally was able to approach it and offered it water, and it drank it out of a bottle cap. My sister grabbed it and put it in a small cardboard box so it could rest and regain its strength for release. She put the box in the break room and wrote on it, "Do not open, bird inside." Later that day, they were in the break room and one of her coworkers walked in and opened the box, releasing the bird again. My sister asked her why she opened the box and she replied that she thought it was a prank or something. Thankfully, the bird was only confined to the break room and my sister caught it again and immediately released it outside and it flew away. "Do not open, bird inside" became a meme among her friends and coworkers. Emails with "do not open" attachments that was just a goofy bird picture or GIF. Actual boxes with "do not open" on them that contained stuffed bird toys or bird figurines. She left that job some months later, but she left an impact. Story 9. Had a lady come in, disgusted at the state of the store. She was on her hands and knees looking under the racking. She left and came back with plastic bags, gloves, a mask, and cooking tongs. She proceeded to start pulling dust bunnies out from under the permanent racking. She asked for a broom, to which AI politely obliged. End of the day, store closing. I walked her out and thanked her for bringing this to our attention. Never saw her again. Manager called me in for letting her go on like that. She wasn't bugging anyone and she seemed calmer the more she did this. The whole thing went on for about 3 hours. Story 10. In college, I worked for a locally owned dollar store. We had no public restroom, but there was a McDonald's across the street we always directed people to. One night, an elderly lady comes in asking if we have a restroom. I told her no and that McDonald's across the street did. She just says okay and disappeared into one of the aisles. I go back to what I'm doing and about a minute later she left, like her hair was on fire. Checked that aisle and yep, pissed right on our carpeted floor. Story 11. I worked as a supervisor in a 24-hour convenience store. One night, a coworker's mom came in drunk and threatened to slit 2 of our throats because her daughter was a terrible worker who needed to be prompted to do even the most simple of daily tasks. So she had started getting told off frequently. The daughter quit the following day, and her mother was permanently trespassed. Story 12. 20 years back, I was working at Walmart and someone asked me to hold a ladder so they could change the pricing on the sign. This was suspended over the photo center. Well, as he went to change a number, the hook or whatever holding it up let go. The entire sign made out of heavy metal and plastic smashed me right in the face, somehow missed my nose, and I was left with an inch gash above my upper lip and a tear on the right side, that of my nose where it's like connected. I have scars now. The HR person asked me to come in a few days later to sign paperwork so I could return to work when I was better, and it was a return to work form. They bait and switched me and had me back working several days later with stitches still in my face and my lips swollen like a golf ball. Story 13. Worked Aeropostale at local mall in college. Woman brought in recently purchased panties for return, pulled them out of retail bag and laid them on register counter. All of them had been perioded on. I was speechless and completely froze. She broke the silence by triumphantly pulling the receipt from the bag, saying, "Oh, I didn't even realize this was in here." Receipt had been perioded on as well. I switched to back stockroom duty after that. Story 14. I worked at a retail store at the mall for a winter break in college. They are known for selling bachelorette party stuff and crap for your dorm room. They had recently been bought out by a larger company and changed their inventory system. Whenever a product was sold, they would ship 4 more of the exact product. The problem was that they had a sale on lava lamps just before Thanksgiving. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, we had lava lamps stacked floor to ceiling and in the back room. We didn't want them there, and we also didn't want to sell more too. I had to go back to college after the break, so I'm not sure if when the inventory system was fixed and what they ended up doing with hundreds of lava lamps. Story 15. I worked in a garden center for a few years. There was a lady who'd come in once a year to drop hundreds on plants and plant accessories. She always refused the free delivery, so it was down to me to somehow fit all of that into her Fiat 500. The boot was loaded with compost, and the rest of the car looked like a plant pot on wheels. Took nearly an hour each time. It would have been so much simpler and safer for her to just take advantage of free delivery. And story 16. I work as an optician and quite recently had a client come in for a checkup at the optometrist for sight. His eyesight was about -3.50 and -8.00. Those who wear glasses know that this is bad news. He shrugged and said, will do. Been working as a truck driver with this vision and I see great. He doesn't wear glasses. Me and my colleagues thought about asking for his work schedule to know on which days we shouldn't leave the house. Story 17. While scanning groceries, I hear a loud commotion, which included a shopping cart colliding into the service desk and 2 people rushing out of the store. My manager comes around, shaking her head, and I couldn't help but to ask what happened. Apparently, someone stole a display model of a microwave and tried to return it, saying that they bought a faulty microwave but didn't have a receipt or even the box it came in. My manager had heard about the theft earlier in the day and squinted her eyes at the story about how this microwave had no cord and was extremely light to pick up, leading her to ask straight out if they were the ones who stole the microwave, hence them storming out of the store pretty quick. Story 18. I was a manager of a Toys R Us electronics section. So many crazy stories off the top of my head. At the end of the night, I'd have to print out the console count. How many we had at the start of the day, how many sold, how many left. The list had video game consoles, tablets, iPads, iPods, and cameras. I would do my count, call over the storefront manager to double check. Then the SFM would unlock the electronic closet to finish the count. The closet had at least 2 security cameras, and you had to be watched while there as well. We were hemorrhaging Nintendo 3DS and Apple products. My counts would look like day started with 37 Nintendo 3DS, 0 sold today, 22 remaining. But the only people with the key to the electronics closet were the SFM and store manager. Turns out the store manager would turn off the cameras, sneak into the closet, and stuff his jacket. Watched him get escorted out by the police and never saw him again. 2. On Black Friday, 2 new hires worked the front counter together. With every purchase, they would ring a $5 gift card with the order and pocket it. They were both escorted out by the police around 4 a.m., and my manager said it was over $1K each in gift cards. 3. A group of guys casually walked to the sports section, ripped a bunch of basketballs out of their packaging, and ran out at max speed, holding as many as they could. I have more. Story 19. I worked for a major cell company for way longer than I should have. The amount of crazies deal with on a daily isn't something the average person could comprehend. People coming in pissed that we shut their phone off even though it hadn't been paid in months. Upset we wouldn't replace the phone they lost or broke for free. A lot of physical violence threatened toward me because I didn't know the password for tier apps, bank accounts, Missy logins, company servers. Company. I had one particular guy that swore his phone was hacked. Wouldn't take any answer we gave him that it wasn't happening. I came up with the bright idea of telling him he needed to swap his SIM card every 3,000 minutes to keep it secure. It got him out of the store, but he sure did come back religiously every few months to get it changed. Story 20. Was working in a major hi-fi retailer in TV stereo sales. I had an older customer come in with her daughter and buy a cheap TV DVD player combo. She haggled as hard as she could, and just to get rid of her, I gave her a really sweet deal. Probably made about $3 commission off the item. She then proceeded to harass myself and other staff members for months, claiming that the DVD player inbuilt into the TV was scratching her DVDs. She demanded we replace all her DVDs and give her a brand new TV. She bought a few DVDs in as proof, and it was clear as day she had scratched them herself, really brutal scratches. After much deliberation, we replaced the TV, but only with one condition. I would have to go to her house and install it for her. It was like something out of a horror movie. She had the worst house on a nice street. It was filled with rubbish and stuffed animals. I felt like, this is it, she's gonna murder me. I got it installed so fast that I'm pretty sure I didn't do it correctly. A month later, I got transferred stores, and thankfully a mate of mine took my place. So when she came back in looking for me, he told her I'd quit and didn't work for the company anymore. She then demanded my phone number. That was 12 years ago, and I still get the ick thinking about it. Story 21. Worked at Walmart. The first WIC order I ever did had 8 cans of tuna. This was when WIC was still on check form, so you had to fill all of it at one time. The lady with the check had 9 cans of tuna. When I explained to her she had one to many cans, but that was perfectly fine. It's just one wasn't going to go through on her WIC check, and she would be responsible for the cost. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "No, 4 plus 4 is 9. Use your damn fingers." What? Story 22. Worked in receiving for Sears in 2008. This woman comes in one night to pick up a grill that she had bought and had assembled at the store. It was a liability for us to tie a purchase down for a customer, but we could offer them twine to do so themselves. She backs up to the loading dock. I load her grill onto her truck bed and insist on giving her some twine to tie it down. She says that it'll be fine. She doesn't live that far away. All right, cool. I did my job. I show up the next morning and one of the managers comes running through the back looking for me, shouting, "Where is he? Is he here yet?" She finally finds me and starts yelling, "Did you load a grill last night? Why didn't you tie it down?" I told her that yes, I did load a grill, and no, I did not tie it down because we're not allowed to. But I kept offering the customer something to tie it down on their own, and they refused. She's so mad that I did what I was supposed to and didn't do anything wrong, yells at me that their grill fell of the back of the truck on the highway and shattered. Story 23. OMG, some of these are so terrible. Mine is not as bad, but it was gross to me and completely baffling. I worked in a store with display beds. I think there were 5. People would let their kids play on them, so I had to remake them every night after closing. At least once a week I would find a pair of women's panties, which had clearly been worn. The beds were out in the middle of everything, clearly visible in the crowded, brightly lit store. I've never been able to figure out how or why anyone would leave panties there. I guess it would only take a minute to stuff them under the covers, but why? I was supposed to put them in Lost and Found, but I always put them in the garbage instead. Story 24. Worked in a middle-class British supermarket chain about 10 years ago. Saturday morning shift. Not overly busy, but plenty of footfall. Our chilled dairy section was more or less opposite the tills when I started hearing raised voices from the chilled section. Turns out an elderly lady, roughly 70 years old or so, had collapsed face first into the cheese chiller, lying there face down in a mix of butters and non-dairy spreads. Fairly serious stuff, CPR being given by bystanders and staff. I didn't get involved directly, only 17 or 18 at the time, only keeping other customers from rubbernecking and giving thid old dear some dignity. When I hear a large, disapproving huff from this is when a middle-aged woman stood behind me. Think middle-class Karen. Hair up in bun, designer leather jacket, designer bag, designer boots, face butchered by so much filler and Botox it was giving Michael Jackson a run for his cash. With that quintessential entitled British degrading tone. In my nicest customer service voice, explained that there is an ongoing medical emergency and this aisle is closed. She huffs again, getting impatient, replies in the most condescending tone of, "Well, I don't have all day to wait, go and get me these things," as if I was her servant. I again politely inform her I couldn't, as the products she wanted were directly where this elderly lady was. She huffs and snarks and proceeds, without any hesitation, to push me out the way with her trolley, push her way past another member of staff, parks her trolley next to the woman being given CPR, reaches over her and the staff giving her CPR and grabs 2 blocks of cheese, puts them in her trolley and trots off like nothing was happening, oblivious to what was happening. I was in speechless disbelief on how cold people could be. Retail, never again. Story 25. Was working the cash register at a card shop. 3 kids each, about 15-ish years old, walk in and buy a booster pack each. The last one pays with cash but is about 25 cents short. He lets out the disgusted teenager sigh and asks, "Can I have a quarter?" I was confused and told him no. We then have a long conversation about how he needs the quarter to pay for the booster pack. I tell him that's not how a store works. He finally sighs and says, "Fine, I'll just use my store credit." This kid fights with me over a quarter for 3 minutes when he had $20 in store credit the whole time. He bought his booster pack, opened it, and dropped the wrapper on the floor in front of me. Story 26. Worked at Walmart for over a decade. The 3 memorable stories. I worked nights and was stacking food onto a cart so I could stock. Some guy asked my name. I tell him since it was clearly visible on my name tag and because I'm LOL. He asked if I want him to be my man. I told him no because I had a man. He told me he had a woman and he'd take care of both of us. Told him no thanks and took off to do my job. 3 days later, there's an angry woman looking for me by name because apparently I hit on her man. I didn't wear my name badge for about 3 years after that. 2. The power went out in the section of town the store was in. They had us raid sporting goods for headlamps and flashlights and made us stock anyway. Store manager called someone by the wrong name that night and almost got a box knife in his heart. 3. The lawnmowers were stacked too high in Garden Center and were apparently touching the overhead heaters in Garden Center, and they smoldered till they caught fire. We noticed on our lunch break and had an extended lunch while the FD cut the flames. Story 27. A customer came up to me holding women's stockings and flats and asked me if he could get a second opinion. I assumed he wanted a woman's opinion on something for his wife, so I said sure. He explained that he had lost a bet and had to dress up as a woman for work. His friends had even bought him a dress. He said that he was starting to get cold feet and asked me if I would go through with it if I was in his shoes. I told him that at this point it was too late to back out, which he seemed disappointed by but still accepted my answer. He then asked if I thought it would be okay if he changed in the restrooms, and after I gave him an answer, he went on his way. Story 28. Back in late 90s, I was a cashier at a big box store. Had an elderly regular who was a menace. I rang up all her stuff and she refused to write me a check until I balanced her checkbook. I quickly balanced it and got her out of my line. 15 or so years later, I am shopping and hear a customer screaming at a cashier because she forgot her debit card PIN number and it was cashier's fault. As I passed, I realized it was same lady still being a pain in everyone's ass. Story 29. I once had a customer demand that Apple cover the repair of her Cat P laptop. I tried explaining that this was considered a biohazard and wouldn't be able to be repaired. She would have to buy a new one. She just wouldn't take no for an answer and demanded that we replace it for free. After all, it wasn't her fault, right? It was the cat. My manager jumped in and is trying to explain the same thing, and at some point, after we're going nowhere with this customer, my manager asks her why she feels that this is something that Apple should cover, and she acted so offended at this question that up to that point we had been providing good customer care, but somehow we crossed a line. So bizarre. A day later, we get her written feedback about how rude the manager was and how we crossed a line when we asked her that. No idea. Also, in positive intent, I opened the bottom of her MVP, and the P had crystallized and fully stunk up the repair room. Story 31 time had a woman when I worked at Spencer's Gifts chalk up a convo with me how she was buying her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, a shirt for Xmas. After she went and speculated he was having an affair with a guy, she decides to go onto Craigslist to pretend she was a dude and straight up found her husband seeking men. Husband had no idea he was taking to his actual wife and thinking it was some dude, would send videos, photos to him. Then, by the time she gathered enough evidence, she presented all to his family and him on Thanksgiving, exposing him. But yet here she was, still buying him a U t-shirt from Spencer's. I was 18, first retail job, maybe 1 month into working there. Story 31. I work at a gas station. We card every single person and will deny sale without it. A guy came in saying he left his ID at home, that he had a picture of it though. I denied him as he proceeded to tell me his brother had just passed and the store down the street accepted his photo yesterday. While trying to show me the photo of his ID, he scrolled to a photo of his brother in his casket. He did not get his cigarettes. Story 32. I was working at the cash register at a Starbucks in a Target when an overweight woman came in wearing a graphic t-shirt. While I was taking her order, I looked at her shirt to see if I could find out what was on the shirt. This is when I realized there was about a 2-inch hole exposing her entire areola. I looked away and tried to awkwardly finish the order. Do you see at Target sometimes? Story 33. Long ago, I worked at a music store. More than once, folks would call us and ask if we, quote, had that song by that guy. If we were extra lucky, they would hum or sing a few bars over the phone. That job also gave a US moments where someone walked right up to my teenage ass and asked if we had that song In the Butt, which is a real song by David Allan Coe, if I remember correctly, so he wasn't trying to be gross. Story 34. My son works at a truck stop. They only ever have one person working at a time. A couple weeks ago, he had a human trafficking/OD incident in the parking lot. As he was outside on the phone with 911 trying to deal with it, a line formed inside the store. He got screamed at for not being at the register. Last night, my husband and I went to said truck stop to get gas and say hi. The cops were rolling in just about the same time. Apparently, there was a hit and run. He came outside to meet the cops and they greeted him with his first name. We go inside and I ask, how often does this happen? He says, Mom, I'm on a first name basis with the cops. What do you think? He really should write all the down that he's seen. It's truly nuts. Story 35. I used to manage a lumber yard. Boomer comes in and tells my employee he will take 1 sheet of finished veneer to match what was in his trailer. My employee let him know we don't sell that and don't have a vendor for it, but there's a specialty store nearby that can probably source it for him. Boomer man freaks out and asks my employee if he's an American or an American. My employee decided instead of going off on this guy and risking his job, he should just walk away and find me to deal with it. Correct thing to do. I come back to the customer fully expecting him to change the story. Instead, he told me the exact same thing that happened. Then he went on to tell me that when he served in the military, his own men would have shot and killed him if he didn't obey orders. And in a retail store, the customer gives orders and the employees follow them. I was founded but explained to him this wasn't the military too. We can't sell him something we don't carry and don't have a vendor for. And 3, I don't appreciate him asking my employee if he's an American when he served in the Army, carrying fallen soldiers' coffins and protecting the tomb of the unknown soldier. He walked out mumbling under his breath about younger generations not respecting their elders and that he'd never shop at our store again. Story 36. I was working at Sheetz, gas station with a built-in fast food type thing, and was training this new guy how to put orders in the bag and call out the number. That was the whole position. Put the food in the bag with napkins, call number. Can't this up, right? Important detail. The only two bags we had were red plastic shopping bags like grocery bags and small brown paper bags for small orders. Well, someone ordered a pizza, which were personal size, and after cooking we cut them into 4 pieces and put them in the little paperboard box. So I do all that and hand him the box and tell him which order it was, and just assumed common sense would tell him it goes in the plastic bag and not the paper one. About 5 minutes later, a guy comes up and says, "Hey man, can I get another one?" The pizza topping slid everywhere and it's a mess. I look at what he's holding, and it's a misshapen paper bag standing upright. I was founded for a second trying to grasp the fact that the new guy, left to his own devices, opted to shove the pizza box vertically into the paper bag and hand it out, instead of putting it in the plastic bags that were closer to him than the paper ones. The lack of common sense was truly astounding. He left like later that night or the next day without saying anything. I felt bad for him, but like, damn man. I hope he found something that he's good and happy at, though. Story 37. Worked in a hockey equipment store in college. A small Asian woman came in looking for a helmet while in rainbow tiger print leggings and a large green boa. After talking for a bit, trying to figure out what she needed and how we could assist, she was in for a helmet. Continued to ask, seeing if she needed a face mask or not, when she exclaimed loud enough for the whole store to hear, "For roller derby!" Her very sheepest and nerdy husband cracked a smile for the first time since walking in. Story 38. I used to work for Rite Aid, and boy howdy do I have some stories to share. Wow, I have a bunch of stories, but here are some of my favorites. 1. This lady approached a guy who was maybe in his early 20s and asked him if he wanted to do drugs with her in the bathroom. They did not know each other, apparently. So he says yes. They both go into the bathroom. These bathrooms were the single-person use kind with just a toilet/urinal, sink, soap, paper towels, TP, and a door that locks. So they do the drugs. He does not ask what drugs he just took. After a bit, he collapses in the medicine aisle. Turns out he OD'd. As the manager on duty and the pharmacist call the cops and perform CPR, the lady flees off into the night. 2. This homeless lady would loiter outside the main doors asking for change and occasionally offering UL favors. As per company policy, we could not kick her off the premises unless customers started complaining. Well, this one night, a regular known for having seizures was walking towards the door when she confronted him. I was ringing out another couple when someone came in telling us that someone was having a seizure out front. So, we get on the phone with 911, and the pharmacist and I head out front to help him. He was fine, just a minor episode, but nothing serious. EMS knew him by name and got him situated. When the pharmacist and I asked him what happened, he said, "That fat homeless lesbian stole my wallet." Yeah, apparently she approached him asking for money, and when he declined, she became hostile. That triggered his seizure, and as he was seizing, she ran off with his wallet. 3. This guy came from the bar across the street wearing camo pants, a shirt, and had a 6-foot stuffed gorilla on his shoulders. He walked in, looked at the security camera, and started quoting scripture. I was not on duty this night, and do not know any more information, unfortunately. 4. This lady came in to use Western Union. For y'all that may not know, WU is a money transfer service. So, we had a kiosk that usually didn't work, and we couldn't fix it because it was a third-party device. So we had to call WU and wait for a representative, but we waited over a year and nobody showed up. Not the point of the story, though. So this lady comes in to use the kiosk. You pick up the phone, it automatically dials. You talk to either a helpful lady, a guy who doesn't speak clear English, or an automated system. You get the code and take it to the cashier, who then, if they have enough money in their drawer, completes the transaction and gives or takes the money depending on if you are sending or receiving. The machine was not working for this lady, and she was getting pissed, understandably so. Well, she was wearing this tight spaghetti strap outfit and a bra that had to have been a size or two too small. Her tongue hogger or cougars were nearly spilling out of the top, like when you fill up a glass of water to the brim, but the water doesn't break the surface tension. Well, she started stomping around and jumping, but somehow, those hunga-dunga no-no-lagongas didn't budge. To this day, I don't know how they defied the laws of physics and gravity, because they should have easily popped out. 5. Our theft prevention guy was in because we were in a bad neighborhood and were prone to being robbed. He was watching the cameras and catching people left and right. It was wild. Well, he caught this one guy. Apparently, he was either trying to steal a lot or said something to piss off our TP guy. But next thing I know, our TP guy tells me he'll be back and follows the guy down to the nearest Family Dollar, where our TP guy then warns the Family Dollar employees how this guy was trying to steal from us. It was based. D6. Finally, my favorite interaction. I was ringing out a customer when this lady walks in and interrupts the transaction to ask a question, despite the line of people waiting and the overall rudeness of doing that. She asks, "Do y'all sell ice?" I say, "Yes, we do." Along the wall all the way back, last cooler on the left. I gesture towards the wall and back to where the coolers are at as I say that. She says, "All right, where's that?" All I could do in the moment was repeat myself, but slower. And after she walked off, the customer I was cashing out shared a confused glance with me. I don't know how I could have been clearer. Story 39. I started working when my store was very understaffed. So understaffed that the managers were doing cashier work. I had to use the restroom once in the middle of my shift, and apparently while I was in there, some Karen got in a snit with the manager at the register. So I come out of the restroom to catch the tail end of the argument. Important to note here is that managers and cashiers wore different colored shirts, and it was just me and a bunch of managers that day. So I come out from the back in shirt that is colored different from everyone else at the counter, and the lady locks onto me. She starts lecturing me, a cashier, about keeping my employees in line, making sure they respect customers, all that jazz. She's telling me to discipline my managers, in particular my boss, who she was arguing with. Finally, she runs out of air and leaves in a huff. I look at my boss. He looks at me. She thought I was the manager. We both bust out laughing, and the lady comes back inside, screaming about us thinking she was a joke. We de-escalate. I apologized and she leaves, but I never forgot about that. Story 40. When I was a cashier, there was an older lady who regularly shopped at our store and demanded a military discount every single time, despite not having any proof of being a veteran, as was required. She would always try to find a new employee to try to trick them. She never got the discount from me, or anyone if I was around to say so. There is no telling who got in trouble due to her antics. Years later, I'm no longer working there, just shopping. And guess who is at a register arguing with an older cashier who looks absolutely confused and anxious? Scammin' Sue spots me and yells out, "Hey, you work here. Tell them about my discount." I guess she recognized me but forgot who I was. I took this opportunity to say what I wanted without fear of getting in trouble. I tell her to leave the poor cashiers alone and something along the lines of, if she really fought for this country the way she fights for this discount, she'd be able to show some proof of that by now. The look on her face was priceless. The workers were so confused because they didn't know me or how I knew what she was doing. It felt so satisfying, though. Story 41. I was working on a slow weekday morning at your local game store, and this odd-looking incel-type guy opened the door, peeked his head in, and asked, "Is it all right if I eat in here?" With an eye roll, I said, "Sure, as long as you don't make a mess, I guess." So this guy proceeds into the store without any food that I can see, and after browsing for a moment, reaches into his trench coat while looking over the selection and pulls out a full stalk of broccoli and starts munching on it. I just stood there staring at him in disbelief. The guy quickly picked out a game for his Nintendo Wii and made his purchase. He told me that broccoli was high in antioxidants, and I learned something that day. Solid customer interaction, 10/10. Story 42. About 15 years ago, I worked for a hunting equipment store in the gun department, working my way up to that department's manager position. A crew of at least 5 guys, from what we could deduce from the camera footage, could have been more of them, came in to steal something. You could see them all subtly working together, figuring out what to take. We had an obscure SIG over-under shotgun that we'd had in the store for over 10 years we were trying to finally sell, once and for all. So we put it on the glass counter, broken down, and placed in the fancy diamond pattern metal case within reach of anyone, normally against policy for guns, but such was our desperation. The other 4 or 5 thieves distracted my sales guys while their lead thief took the upper portion of the gun, slipped down one leg of his pants, and slipped the lower part in the other pant leg, held on to each through his pockets, and straight leg waddled his way out. All this in the middle of the damn store surrounded by people. Somehow nobody noticed him hiding it, the huge bulges in his pants legs or his odd waddle. My response to the managers bitching about the theft and how my guys allowed it to happen? I'm proud they kept so many guys there for 2 whole hours. And hey, no more SIG shotgun. Story 43. While I was going to college back in the 80s, I worked the 3 to midnight closing shift at a stop and rob. The store was located at the off-ramp intersection. The store is set up with the cash register by the intersection and 10 gas pumps along the access road. One night around 11:30, I notice a van come under the highway and then do a slow drive the length of the store with the driver giving me a hard look. Thinking I'm about to get robbed, I quickly make a drop to keep the cash register at or below $20. The van pulls all the way to the far end of the parking lot and stops just before it leaves the driveway. I'm watching now, though more out of curiosity than worry. I see the overhead light come on through the driver's window, then a young lady come around from the back of the van. She then commenced to do a heel-to-toe walk, like a DWI test, down the driveway. Let me explain here that she was only wearing her birthday suit and a very red face. She came in the store, walked to the cooler, got a 6-pack of Coors Light, and came to the counter to pay for it. She set the beer on the counter and handed me a $5 bill and her driver's license. Drinking age was 18 and the beer was about $3.50 IORC. She stuttered something about a sorority initiation while I was ringing her up. I asked what college as I was bagging her beer, and she told me. Unfortunately, it was not the same one I was going to. I handed her the change and her ID, which she promptly dropped into the sack with the beer and heel to tote it back across the parking lot where she got in the van, and they left. No video surveillance cameras back then, but I do have a story to tell. Story 44 guy. I worked with getting carts, drove a 90s Accord. He came into work and somehow he got the front bumper of his car wedged into the wheel of a customer's utility truck. He stood there, looked at it. None of us had any idea what to do. I went back across the lot to get carts, and a while later I saw management, him, and I'm assuming the guy in the high visibility vest on his phone was the guy whose truck it was standing next to it. I went over to see what the resolution to this event would be, and I watched my coworker, who didn't get fired somehow, get in his car, and when he reversed out of the guy's wheel, it ripped the entire bumper and one of the headlights off his car, while the wheel on the truck didn't even have a scratch on it. Story 45, I work at Subway, so the fast food equivalent. Important context, my store operates on a military base, meaning we do 3-6x more business than an average Subway does on any given day. Our lunch rush might be 150 units for the peak hour, whereas a normal store might make 35, 60 depending on the store. A few months ago, we had a guy come in just before the start of lunch rush and begin his order while it was still slow. After completing it, he began to order another sandwich, then another, then another. The line was beginning to form. He reached sandwich number 13, meaning that by this point the entire store is full of people waiting, 50 plus in a theme park-style queue, and all 13 sandwiches lined up on the cutting boards. His 14th was his last. When he finished that, he got over to the veggie side and had no clue what he wanted on any of them. Each one was for a different person. It's worth mentioning that this was what I will delicately refer to a somewhat challenged individual. In this situation, that meant constantly trailing off and getting distracted throughout the entire ordering process, significantly extending things. After multiple texting and phone call sessions and some serious study of his disorganized order write-down sheet, he manages to complete the vegetables. The line is out the door by this point. He comes to the end of the line where we are about halfway done bagging his sandwiches, only to start angrily telling us that he was each individual name written on the stickers of the sandwiches. Our 1-14 numbers just weren't enough. I can't remember any of the specific names, but every single name was an extremely weird, out-of-pocket nickname, like something that could never possibly be in a birth certificate. I think one may have been Smiley. Once that is finally done, he approaches the register. You not, this is the can't make this up part. This mother ear pulls out a rubber-banded stack of credit cards as thick as a deck of playing cards and informs us that he intends to pay for each and every sandwich individually, one to each card. No. They were not in the order he placed them. Ultimately, this douche clown cost us quite a lot of business in the form of walkouts and took about 30 minutes to move through the system. Our lunch rush was a horrific nightmare because of how backed up we were without ever having had a fair chance to get off the ground. I implore you, do not do this. Every aspect of this could and should have been done better. He should have had everything written in order. He should have informed us of the quantity of his order to begin with. He should have had the vegetables written out properly. He should have numbered the sandwiches on his paper so we didn't need names. He should have paid with one card and had everyone PayPal him. It's not fair to put all of that on us and completely train wreck the next 4 hours of 7 people's shifts because you're too lazy to plan. End of rant.